All right. Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital. We are a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital, who choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can learn more about us at www.togetherindigital.com. And this week, I'm really excited to introduce all of you to Kristen Zavo. She is a career coach, a keynote speaker, the best-selling author of Job Joy, Your Guide to Success, Meaning, and Happiness in Your Career. Can't we just all use a little bit, if not a lot of that? Before launching her coaching practice, Kristen spent nearly 2 decades in traditional corporate jobs, feel you there, including time in investment banking, consulting, and industry, working on some of the top Fortune 500 companies, such as, Lehman Brothers, NBC, Luxottica, and those other well-known brands include also Oakley and Ray-Ban. So such a cool factor. And she is on a mission to help unfulfilled high achievers land jobs, launch businesses, and build careers and lives that they absolutely love on their own terms. I hope all of you who are listening right now feel like you're in the right place, because I want you to know that you are those high achievers who deserve happy and fulfilling jobs. And I love that that is exactly what Kristen does. So Kristen, say hey to everybody. Thanks
Hey,
for being here.
everybody. And it's so nice to see some familiar faces. Laura, Ruby, Julie, Nicole. Hello, hello. And I'm really excited for today's topic. Thank you for having me, Amy.
Oh, of course. It's always our pleasure. Kristen has come and spoke recently, or maybe not so recently. I don't know. Time's weird anymore, right?
Maybe the last year.
At our last virtual job fair. And I just remember people leaving your talk and saying, I have been so stressed in my either job search or career shift, and I felt so burnt out. That's what you tackled in that topic, and that talk was burnout. And I just remember people like, it's hard sometimes when we're living in this world of Zoom and whatnot to really be able to read when people have had a good time or really felt connected to a speaker. But Kristen, they all felt so connected and so fulfilled and so re-energized by you. So I'm excited for the group that's here and listening today. And before we sort of kind of get into the tactics and strategies on how to stay sane while making a career pivot, I wanted to ask you, what makes you so passionate about helping others find the best career for them?
Yeah. So, like many people in my position, I got here because of my own experience, right? And I, had, as Amy said, nearly 2 decades, 18 years. Isn't that crazy? In traditional corporate roles. And, it took me a long time to figure out why I wasn't happy. I changed jobs, I changed careers multiple times. And, every time I would get in, it's like, okay, this is it. I've got it. Right. And I'm following the rules and, starting from school, right. I got good grades. I got the good job. I'm climbing the corporate ladder. I'm, making good money. Right. And from all outside perspective, right. I had done it. Right. I had, what else could I want? And yet when I looked around at the, what should have been the height of my career, I was the most unhappy, the most lonely, the most, just in survival mode. And, that really shook me. And, basically my goal is to, help my clients get through that a lot faster. You don't need to spend 18 years wondering what's wrong with me or how can I find work that I actually love? And a big piece of how I came to this work was actually in my last major corporate career change, which is why I love the topic we're talking about today, because that change was a complete 180. I went from finance to retail marketing and strategy. And that's when people started to ask me, wait, what? How'd you do this? And you got a promotion? And will you look at my resume? And what do I say at this networking event? So I didn't know it then, right? But that was the beginning of coaching for me.
That is amazing. I think that is true. I always want to give credit where credit's due for like quotes and sayings and things. We have a member in San Francisco, Angela, who once stated that the best thing about, women like us who come together and are willing to share our authentic stories and journeys, in not just our success, but our failure, you're basically creating a survival guide for another woman. And so what I love about your story, and, I feel very similar, having been in the ad and digital industry for, almost 20 years, and then taking a complete leap and shift into this community that I loved and adored and found as a form of my own self-care in a way that it wasn't just a career catalyst, because you're right. I mean, and I would love to know, like, of our live audience who's listening today, like, how many of you have already reached that point of where you've ascended to where it is you were like, if I just make six figures, I will be happy. If I just get this VP title, then I will be happy. Like, this conditional sort of goal setting for ourselves. To me, I'm definitely one of those people where it's like, I got to that point where I was like, oh, I make the salary. Oh, I got the title. Oh, why am I still miserable? Like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? And so that kind of leads nicely into our next question. And audience, feel free to like chime in and let us know if you are there, or if maybe you are kind of chasing those numbers, chasing that title. But what are some other telltale signs or situations you see, people start to kind of make that choice in a career change? Because I'm assuming all of our listeners, or anyone who's listening to this after, you're all in a different place at a different time. What are some of the either telltale signs or situations that especially high achieving women find themselves in which they realize, oh, it might be time for a change?
Yeah. And I mean, you just said one of them, right? When you reach goals and you get there and maybe you're happy for a minute or a week, right? And then you kind of come back to, that's an example of where, the goal, if it's not, if the work is not aligned, right?
Mhm.
Hitting that goal, making more money, getting the promotion, whatever big thing you were going after, the happiness is going to be short-lived.
Yeah.
Right. And so if, you're chasing those goals and they're not satisfying you like maybe they used to, right? That could be something to look at, because many times when that's the case, it's because that's just covering a symptom. Yeah, you give me more money, I'll be happy,
Right.
right? Until I kind of get back to the reality of my day to day, right? And that was definitely the case for me in my career. But thinking about another huge telltale sign, and I hate when it gets to this point. Usually, it has to for us to make a change.
Yeah.
But when we're sick, when we're
Mhm.
emotionally, mentally, physically not well.
Yeah.
When I was in a career that was burning me out, and that quite honestly wasn't a fit. I had never had health issues my entire life, and I was going to a neurologist in New York who specialized in stress and migraine headaches,
Yep.
right? To the point where I was, just to manage the headaches that were a result, which if anyone here has had migraines, this is not like just a little,
Yes.
right?
No.
At the worst, it was so bad. I was in bed and I literally couldn't move my head side to side. It hurt so bad. And I remember calling the neurologist and begging her for like something to just knock me out. Just not because I wanted to feel good, guys, just so I
Right.
could sleep.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had been on like 8 different medications
Mhm.
for trying to solve this. So all this to say, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, if you are literally, if your body and your emotional space is, having that reaction, that is a sign.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes we know
Mhm.
it's time for a change, but we're afraid to admit it, because what will that mean? What will
Right.
our partner say? What if we fail? What if this dream is too big? It's going to blow up my whole life, right? And so sometimes for all these reasons, we kind of push it down, even though we know the
Mm.
answer, right? And when we do that for months and years, I did that for years when I was in consulting. I should have left 4 years before I did, at least 4 years.
Mhm.
But when I did that over and over and kept pushing down my truth, what I
Mm.
knew, your body reacts, right? There's a book out there, a very classic book in the world of psychology, The Body Keeps Score,
Yep.
right? And, that he's talking about trauma, but like stuff
Mhm.
at work can be traumatic. Okay. So if you're sick, if you don't recognize yourself, right? Because being in a job that is not a fit, it affects your relationships. It affects how you show up as a parent, as a partner,
Yes.
as a friend, right? When are snapping at people, it's almost like you have this out of body, who am I?
Mhm.
Right. Also, if you're in a new season of life, it could be a great time to consider if it's time for a career change. And this could be a new season in a variety of ways. I worked with a client who had just had a baby. And she also at the same time had a parent who was very sick, right? This is a new season of life. So what she needed from her career, right, is different at that point. And so for her to keep going after the same jobs and climbing that same ladder wouldn't have made sense, right? Even thinking about these last 2+ years, they have changed us. We are different people. The job that might have satisfied you in January 2020,
Right.
probably not what's going to satisfy you now.
Yeah.
And so really looking at, how have these last couple of years changed me?
Mhm.
What have I seen that maybe I was tolerating, right? But that is not working for me. There was a great article in the Sunday Times last week where, the title was something like, ping pong tables just aren't going to cut it anymore to bring people back to the office, right? And there was a time just a couple of years ago where free snacks, games, maybe jeans on Friday were enough, right, to bring people in. And now, these past 2 years have kind of taken those glasses and those conditioning off and made us question, right? What is important to us? What do we want our day-to-day to look like? So really thinking about who you are now, what's important to you now. Another way that you can know that it is time for a career change is, if you've really tried. So in your current career, you've tried with the current company, you've tried redesigning your role, you've tried setting boundaries. Maybe you've had this job at another company and you're starting to realize, wait, it's not the company, it's not the boss. They might suck, but that's not the reason I'm unhappy, because it's the industry, it's the job as a whole that even if I was in the best environment ever, it's not a fit. So really being honest with yourself about that, right? And sometimes, and this is really true, for those of us who, have been in the career space for a while, 10+ years experience, sometimes it's a matter of growing up, right? It's like the first half of our life, we follow the rules we're told, right? This is the roadmap. You do this, you will be successful and happy. And at some point, for those of us who are lucky, it's in our 30s, some of us, it's our 40s or 50s, right? We're like, wait, this isn't working for me. And we get to make a decision that for the second half of our life, right, we're going to define success on our own terms. We're going to decide what is right for us. And so many of us haven't even considered, what do I want, right, for my career, my life, since choosing a major in college, right? And so some of it is really growing up and being honest with ourselves and having the courage to go after what we want and who we are and the impact that we know in our hearts we're here to make.
And even why did you choose that major? What made you feel so inclined to choose that major? And you're exactly right. I mean, for some of us, that might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. And you're right. We are different people. Talk to a lot of our members, and I coach a lot of women as well who aren't members of Together Digital. And I hear it all the time. It's like, I don't feel like the company aligns with my values, or I've experienced a ton of health concerns and I value my time with my family and quality time on my health versus working myself to death. Or just not growing. Are you at a point where you've basically reached a capacity where you're capable of more, but the company that you're at doesn't provide the opportunities that you need to kind of grow? It is funny that you mentioned The Body Keeps the Score. That book actually came up last week. And it's an older book. And you don't have to read it all cover to cover. I think understanding the premise is important, because I will warn anybody who is interested in checking out the book, it is quite triggering because there is a lot of traumatic experiences in there. But they do talk about how everything manifests within our bodies. And I do think, the blessing and the curse that was COVID, I think has made a lot of folks more aware. So I think it's not surprising that you bring it back up, because I think, especially women after these last 2 years, we have to start being more aware of how our mental health is impacting our physical health and vice versa. Because like you said too, I just wanted to touch on it again. It's just like, there is this sense of falling asleep to yourself, and so the things I was taking away just kind of as highlights, because that was such a great all-encompassing answer, is to maybe like sit back no matter where you are right now, because I think you should just always be questioning everything. Actually, if you go back and listen to last week's podcast too, that was a great talk with a member who is also an anthropologist, and we talk about conformity. and how much of our decision making is based on our desire to feel like we need to belong and to fit in. And sometimes that makes us make choices that we don't question often. We just make them and then we don't think about who made them. So really understanding like, what are your values? Like, and that takes time. You can't just sit down and like write them out. Honestly, you have to kind of be paying attention to yourself and like the choices that you actually do make for yourself to say, oh, this is what I value when I come to work. I value X, Y, and Z. I value flexibility. I value autonomy, so that you can start to see what those things are. And then really just kind of listening to what, a lot of folks call like your inner knowing, and trusting yourself enough to be able to say like, yeah, I'm making my next career change, choice, shift, whatever, based on nobody's opinion but my own. And you're right, that's such a liberating thing. And I agree with you. I hate that it came to midlife for me and a lot of women that I've talked to as guests here, to be able to be like, yeah, it took me like half my life to realize that. But then again, it doesn't matter how old you are when you're listening to this. At any point, you can be making a shift or a change. It just seems like those of us who are beyond 40 all of a sudden get a swift kick in the pants. And we're like, oh, I don't have to give any shits about what people think about me. I can just do what I need to do, what makes me happy. And the last thing I wanted to note that you said was, how are you showing up? That is huge. That is so telling as to when you are done with a work culture, with a position, a job, and not just how are you showing up to work, but how are you showing up when you go home? That was a big thing for me too, Kristen. Like when I would come home and I would like lay into one of my kiddos because I was just stressed out about my work and I wasn't really like, what they were doing was not worth them getting yelled at. That's when I was like, ooh, I don't like who I'm coming home as. Like, this is not who I want.
Yeah. And I mean, think of all the energy, right, to put on a face at work.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, it all comes down at home, or even if you are able to put on a face, even at home. I was talking to a client this morning and she was very stressed about her current situation. She's like, oh, I don't think the kids are affected. I put on a good face. And I'm like, but imagine how much energy you would have if you didn't have to put on a face everywhere. And guess what? Everyone feels it. Even if you slap on a smile and you go cry in private, they know.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's funny. I just posted something like that too recently on LinkedIn. And it was really, it's like, I've forgotten what it's like to show up to work and not be myself. And I realize that is an immense, immense privilege. And you are right. If you all are looking for any other quote unquote compensation for taking that leap and not being afraid of making a change, is that, yeah, when you can show up and be yourself doing the thing that you love to do and getting paid enough to be able to make your ends meet, you're going to have so much energy for the rest of your life, because we are not just, living to work, Awesome. We're getting a lot of good comments in our chat as well. So please keep it up. I promise I'll go back through and read through them. But our next question is, okay, so I'm hopefully for everyone who's listening, we've touched on a little bit of a nerve to say like when you maybe have felt you needed to make that change and why. So my next question for you, Kristen, is what in the hell do I do next? I've decided I've had enough. I feel brave. I feel bold. I feel empowered. How do I even begin to go about making a career shift? Maybe in the midst of either looking for a job or if I'm currently at a job even.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do, and this is going to be very hard for a lot of people here because you're overachievers. I mean, it's a Friday at lunchtime and you are doing personal career development right now, right? So you are used to doing an action and probably hustle, right? Maybe you're ready to get rid of that hustle culture. But I'm going to tell you to slow down. I want you to spend time with yourself every single day, even if to start, it's just 5 minutes of journaling or meditating, because so much of what brings us to this place where we're considering a career change is because we got where we are by following someone else's rules, someone else's, ideas of what is right or what is good, or these are the dues I need to pay, or this is just the way it is. Have you guys heard anyone say work isn't supposed to be fun? Yeah, I call bullshit. It's not going to be fun every moment of the day, but in my mind, I think you should like 80% of what you do. And I know that's very high. The studies show that even if you just like, I think it's something like 20 to 30% of what you do, that is enough to be fulfilled at work. My bar is a little higher, but I did write a book called Job
We
Joy.
are achievers.
Yeah. So I want you to slow down and connect with yourself, build that relationship with yourself so that you know in this next chapter in your career that it's coming from here. It's not coming from what you should do or what's next on the path or what's going to look good on your resume or what so-and-so is going to be proud of, right? That it's coming from you. And, you know, if you haven't been doing anything, this can really just be a few minutes in the morning, right? But I want you to slow down. I want you to do the inner work, right? So really thinking about, you know, and these are some questions that I share, you know, in the clarity module of my Find Your Job Joy program. We look at, okay, where am I now? How did I get here? Right? Was it the momentum of life? Right? I've had people tell me, I just needed a job right out of school. So I took a job in banking. And now here I am 20 years later as a VP hating what I do. Right? Yep. So it could be as simple as that. Is it that you were trying to please or impress someone? Right? So many of us, and it doesn't even matter how old you are, we're still trying to get approval from our parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it doesn't go away just because you're an adult. Right? Or society or your friends or what you think you should do, right? Was it, you know, why did you get here? Who were you trying to impress? Who were you trying to please? Why were you, if you were, outsourcing your own knowing, right? Because if we don't understand, so it's where am I? How did I get here? And then the why behind it. Because if we don't understand that why, and these are more the kind of unconscious things at play, right? Then we're probably going to make the same mistakes again. And so this is what I mean by that inner work. And also, you know, really spending the time to grieve, you know, that career, that person you were, right? Because something that we don't often talk about in the world of career is that our jobs, our careers, they're like relationships, right? And if you've been doing the same thing, whether it's for 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, right? If you had a romantic relationship for 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, right? It would be a big shock, right? It would be, they say that even personal romantic breakups are one of life's big trauma, right? And it's not really different in your career. And so taking the time and the space to not just reflect on where you were, but holding yourself in just such love and compassion and knowing you were doing your best.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I know, Amy, you said some of us are like, oh, it took me to 40 or took me to my 40s to figure this out. The truth is some people never figure it out. And I want everyone here to trust that there are no mistakes. You are exactly where you're meant to be. And everything you've done up to this point is going to help you be better at whatever it is you're doing next. And not just in your career, but as a human being. Right. So you're going to slow down, you're going to spend time with yourself. You're going to build that relationship with yourself so that you can hear, right? That quiet inner voice. You're going to do the inner work. You're going to do some clarity work, right? We talked about this a little bit before, but who am I now? What's most important to me? A nuance here that I really want to highlight is even though we're focused on career, I want you to ask yourself, I want you to zoom out enough for life. What is important to me in life?
Yes.
The values in life. What do I want my day-to-day to be like? What are the most important things, activities, people I want to spend time with? And then, only then thinking about career and asking yourself, does this job, does this career support the life I say I want? Right. So when I was in consulting, working 80-hour days, traveling, you know, leaving on Sunday, coming home on Thursday or Friday, at that point, if you had asked me, I would have said, I want a life of adventure and fun and love. And that was impossible because by the time I got home on Friday night, after like a 9 o'clock, meeting, yes, we would do that crazy 9 p.m. Right. I was so spent. I didn't have energy for anything. I tell the story of I didn't have the energy to do anything but plop on the couch, order delivery, and watch. You guys remember that show Snapped? You guys remember Snapped? It was on either Oxygen or Lifetime. It's about women going crazy. Okay, so that's like the mental state of where I was, right? And so all those things I said I wanted, right? It wasn't possible in that job. And this is not to say the job, the consulting is bad or the industry was bad, right? Or that I was bad. It just wasn't aligned with who I was and what I wanted, right?
Yeah. There's something interesting there too. As you were speaking, I kind of got this like diagram image in my head of like when you're thinking about a career change or shift. So often it's like we start from the outside to like figure out how we should be inwardly versus starting inward and then going out.
Yeah.
Because the world is a big place, our economy, has accelerated in certain ways because there are new kinds of jobs happening all the time. And you never know when something that is like a life passion of yours actually is the opportunity for an actual career or job or role or company to start. It's one of those things I don't think so often, again, because we're looking outside for those answers. One thing that I jotted down as well that I wanted to requote you on, because I thought it was so good, is don't outsource your inner knowing. I think that was awesome. But then also recognize, to your note of slow down, answers from within never come easy and are never immediate. Just FYI, y'all. It takes time. And like Kristen was saying of, journaling, as hokey as it sounds, and some people are like, oh, journaling, it just finding the right kind of framework for you really is like the best thing. It allows you to be reflective. And it's, again, starting inward to then look outward versus looking outside to figure out how does it all fit in here and make me feel whole. So that's great. Oh, the other thing I wanted to add too is like how much of, your identity was kind of tied up in your past career as well. That's, I think, another really good and tough question to ask yourself. How much of who you think you are is what you do?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
go
Who
ahead.
am I without my career?
Yes.
Guess what? You're so much more than your job.
Yes. I
So
hope
much
so.
more.
You better be.
And it's like, it's the way, and this is a thing we do in America, right? In other parts of the world and in Europe, if you go over there and someone says, yeah, tell me about yourself, they
Yep.
don't necessarily lead with, this is my job.
Right.
And it's sad, but here, that's exactly what we do. And,
Yes.
it's something I had to consciously train myself, not to answer with that first, right?
Yep.
And also even ask questions in a different way when I was, networking with other people, so that they don't feel like I'm saying, what's your job? And it's immediately we size someone up, right?
Yeah, it
What's
is.
the job? Okay, this is, they're probably making good money. This is about, like, I mean, it's crazy, right?
It is, but it's so true. I mean, I lived overseas for 2 years, and I was very stricken by the fact that people clearly did not identify with what they did for a living. And that was very much an American thing to ask. What do you do for a living? Like right after you exchange names. Well, what do you do for a living? Standing, picking up your kids from school. What do you do for a living? Like, no, nobody over there asks that. So actually, Nicole has a nice question here in the chat that is timely. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Can you share some examples of how you do answer that question when somebody asks?
Yeah. So tell me the exact question and then I'll give you an answer. Because I would tell you, yeah.
I think the question is like, tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So
yeah, or what do you do? Yeah, what do you do? Right. That's a really common question, like you were just saying. I think, yeah, how do you respond without saying your job?
If someone specifically says, what do you do? Then yeah, you could share that, right? You could say, well, for work, I'm a career coach, right? But I also love personal development and mindfulness, and I'm really working on this art project, and I've gotten into, I'm learning how to cook my sourdough recipe, right? Like whatever it is, right? So you can answer by saying what I do for work is, and here are the other things I'm really excited, passionate about working on right now, right? And it depends on the circumstance, right? If you are at, one of the in-person together digital events, and the point is specifically to network, to land a job, yes, right, then it is appropriate, right? And so it's not saying that it's wrong. The issue is when we're so focused on it that it becomes an identifier. And so without that career, or if we do lose our jobs, we feel groundless, right? Really comes down to like a self-worth. My worthiness is not dependent on my productivity. It's not dependent on my job. It's not dependent on my title. It's not dependent on how much money I'm making.
Yes. 100%.
Right?
I'm like, amen. I don't know about the rest of you. It is so true. And it makes me so angry. I think it's one of the reasons why I never really, I didn't thrive. Honestly, didn't thrive. I succeeded in corporate society and culture because I could fit the norms. I could do the stereotype. I could be the overachiever. I could be the organizer. But at the end of the day, like, it didn't make me feel more valuable as a human being. And I've never been able to just have somebody walk in the room that has some big title and not just see them as a person. And sometimes that's not always acceptable in corporate culture. But I agree, because I'm sure a lot of people who are listening right now aren't looking for a job. And the last thing that you need on top of the burden of having to look for work is feeling worthless just because somebody asks you what you do for a living, because it doesn't have to be your job. And it could be, I'm exploring X, Y, and Z. Because the other thing I wanted to say too, that I loved the way you answered her question, Kristen, is when you kind of say what you do and then you kind of move into the next thing. And it's like, but I also love, and I don't even care if it's like a networking thing. Granted, we talk about anything and everything at Together Digital. There's like nothing off the table. Quite honestly, personally, professionally, but what you're doing is giving permission for that other person to show up as a person and be like, oh yeah, I love backpacking as well. And then you kind of go off on that topic. And I think it's just a much more, way to honestly create more deep and more meaningful connections with people beyond just what you do, because what you do isn't going to always be forever, and I just don't want to be remembered that way.
I love it, Amy. And it's like we hear all this stuff, and I'm a big proponent, right, of being able to bring our whole human self to work, right? And that is hopefully where we're headed, right? And a lot of companies luckily are doing that. But if we want that world, right, we need to start by being the example, right? And bringing our whole selves. And by the way, just like you said, the connection you make, let me tell you, when you have had a real conversation with a real person and you have things in common, they're going to want to help you coming back to your career, because you actually know and like each other, versus treating, a conversation like a transaction.
Yep.
That doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for you. That's why people, right, hate networking. I don't want to feel desperate. I don't want to look whatever, right? Then don't just focus on that, right? See the other person in front of you as a real human being who also has issues and problems and dreams and all the things, right?
Right. 100%. That's a fabulous networking hack, because I like to joke and tell people, I'm like, I run a networking organization, but I hate networking. I love connecting with people. I love helping them feel
Me too.
a sense of encouragement and change and empowerment, and then connecting them with people who are just like that. So yeah, 100%. I love it. That's a great networking hack. And it's, I think too, as those of you who are job seeking right now, just kind of keep that mindset as well, because it can be tough to be walking into rooms, networking, and knowing that you are looking for something. But honestly, that could be an aspiration or an inspiration to someone. I mean, I've met and talked to so many people over the last even 2 years virtually. Like I am always impressed when I meet somebody, wherever they are in life, in their career, saying, I'm taking the time to learn more about me and figure out what's next for me. Here's kind of where I'm at, where I'm thinking. And I'm just so fascinated by it, because again, it's giving me permission. It's making my wheels spin about when was the last time I checked in with myself and really wondered about, where am I going? What do I want to be doing? How can I be doing it better? How can I be happier while doing it? So I love it. Awesome. So I want to acknowledge too for a moment that some of you might be making career changes and shifts because it's been something outside of your control. Maybe you've been trying to get into a space or an industry and it just doesn't seem to happen, where you can't quite break through. So whether you've decided or the world sort of decided, maybe just things aren't working out the way that you had hoped. I mean, even physical things, like if I've talked to women who've, gone through health issues and can just no longer physically do the job that they were doing before. They have to make some kind of change, that it's time to make a change. And you've done the self-reflection, what are kind of those next steps to start to build towards? So say I have my North Star, I have my vision of where I want to go, what I want to be. How do I even start to get there?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share with you the 3 C's. This is something I teach in Find Your Job Joy. So if you're taking notes, now would be a time. So the 3 C's: clarity, campaign, connection. So clarity, we started with the inner work, right? But you're not going to get all the clarity you need, just you and your journal and just in your head, right? Sorry. But a lot of the clarity you're going to get is, and this speaks to, I see a question in the chat, about how do I have the courage to pivot, right? And a big piece of that is when we have, it doesn't have to be perfect clarity. This is my exact path, exactly what I'm doing. But once we do figure out, okay, this is what I think I want to explore, or these 1, 2, 3 things could be a possibility, then you're going to continue to get that clarity through having conversations with people who already have the job, right? By doing your research. By then, once you figure out, okay, yes, this is what I thought it was. Even, a part of clarity could be seeing, is there a way that I could get some of this experience before even completely changing careers? Right. So if you are, a finance person, right, and you like me, you had an interest in marketing, right? You might see, could I volunteer, right? And maybe I'm in this project and maybe I'm doing the numbers, but I get to sit on the meetings with the marketers, right? So is there a way that you can work and kind of get that experience in your current job? Could it even be volunteer, right? You want to do some marketing. If you volunteer with a nonprofit, maybe you can volunteer to do for their next, whatever the event is, right? Really seeing if there are ways that you can kind of get that practice beforehand. For those of you who are thinking of, launching a business, right? Take on a client or two before you quit your job and launch the business. Make sure that you actually like it. So clarity, might start with the inner work. It might start with the slowing down, the reflection, but then we also get more clarity through action. Then the second piece, the second C, is campaign. So once you feel pretty solid, yes, this is where I want to go, right? Your campaign is really how you position yourself. So how do you, show your value? How do you share how your experience, your passions, your skills, right? Your perspective, right? Because everyone here has a unique perspective. Even if we were all going to do the same job, even if we all technically had the same experience, your perspective, who you are as a person, right, is different than everyone else here. So you're even bringing that, right? And when you can, share that in a way to really connect the dots of your past, of your experience, of your education, right, of your passions and skills, you're connecting those dots to show why you'd be a perfect fit for the job, even though, especially, that you don't have the traditional experience. Right. So when I changed from financial consulting and I was working with companies who were in bankruptcy, chapter 11 finance, and then I moved to, marketing and strategy for, a retailer that was doing really well, I had to make that case. Right. And so what were the transferable skills, right, from consulting? I can pick up on things fast. I've seen a lot of different companies. I've seen what works, what hasn't. Right. I have in some tangential ways done some marketing on different projects, right? I've seen what works from all different size companies, right? And, I could show how, I can come in with a different perspective, right? I can come in and share all these consulting tools. Even as a consultant, it says something about your personality, right? You're able to come in and roll up your sleeves and get down. And then you just find that connection, right? And you're not relying on ATS. You guys know what ATS stands for? Applicant tracking system. If you are making a career change, you cannot rely on applying online. The reason 70+% of applications are never seen by a human being. And let me tell you, if you don't have the traditional experience, the robot, the computer is going to kick you out. And so that leads to the third C, connection, right? So you get clear on what you want. You're taking action. That action is breeding more clarity. You're building your campaign, how you position yourself. That's the story you tell. That is how you show up online. That is your resume. That is your cover letter, right? And then you go to connection, because you can have the best positioning, you can have the clearest clarity, right? But if the right people don't see it, right, it's not going to get you anywhere. And so based on where you're going, based on your story, right, you're going to really look at and identify who are the decision makers, who do I need to get in front of, right, so that I can share my story. And by the way, when you do that, you're going to see what lands. You're going to see what doesn't. You're going to see how it's received. You're going to see what questions come up. And that's going to allow you to refine your campaign, to refine your story, make it even better. And it will probably also give you more clarity. And so these clarity, campaign, connection, these steps, when I teach it, it's in a circle, right? And we get more and more defined until we get right to the middle, which is, that job that you're going after.
Love it. I love alliteration. I love C's. I love things that are memorable. It's the writer in me. And 110%, everything you just said, skills on top of is something that it's just a mindset shift. So I was just in Orlando hosting an event, happy hour ask and give event for some of our Orlando potential members, new members, and existing members. And one woman in particular told me that she had just taken a new role as a project manager, having been working on the dev and backend side of things. And she let the company that she works for talk her into keeping her salary where it was, which is below market value, like general market value for that role, because she didn't have prior project manager experience. Yet clearly she got the job, which meant she was qualified enough to get the job. And I said, well, why didn't you think about the fact that you have the ability to do project management and you understand another back end, which if you're a project manager, that's a tremendous value. If you are able to say, I understand the tech side of what this job needs to be. So that's going to make me 10 times more efficient than any other project manager that you bring
and by
in.
the way, you should be paying me more because I'm bringing you a whole new skill set and perspective that wasn't on this team, and I'm doing the job.
Exactly. So I think a lot of times, just that mindset shift on making a transition does not put you at a deficit. It actually gives you an advantage because the keyword you use there is transferable skills, soft skills, hard skills, past experience, knowledge, perspective, all of those. And then again, I wouldn't be doing what I do right here, right now, if it wasn't for who I know. Granted, LinkedIn helped our founder, Alina Scher, kind of just find me. But I was working in the digital advertising and marketing industry and greatly wanted to get into operations, and was told time and time again that creatives can't run companies. No, you'll never be able to be in ops. And so when she decided she was going to go, based on the encouragement of a member, to go run for Congress, turns around and comes to me when they need somebody to run the company and says, I know and I believe you can do this. Fast forward a few years and now I own the damn company and it is my full-time job. And it's it is absolutely, you're right, Kristen, it is who you know. The market is tremendously challenging out there right now. I know all of you who are looking already know this, so that's not anything new. But again, rather than tripling, doubling, whatever down on the number of applications you're putting out there, I would say take some of that time that you're spending writing resumes and cover letters and spend some quality time networking with people. And I know a great group if you're all looking for one. Next question though. Because this is a big question and it's a big concern when I am talking to women who are making a career pivot or change, is that if you don't have a ton of resources money-wise, what are some other levers that you can begin to pull to make change happen without going into debt over it or spending years in school? A lot of women I talk to are project management's a great one. That's project and product management are two big hot roles right now. And they're like, I have to go get certified. And so they spend thousands of dollars getting certified before they'll even apply for a single job. But if other than that, there has to be other ways. So what are some other levers they can pull?
So for most of us, we don't have to go back to school to try out whatever it is we want to do. Okay. For high achievers, first of all, we all love to learn. If I could find someone to just pay for me to go to school, that would be an awesome job. I'd have lots of doctorates. I would write lots of papers, and I love to learn. Listen, I collect courses the way I used to collect shoes. Okay. So I get it.
Yep.
And many times for overachievers, taking the course, doing the certification, it's a way to delay the more scary, the more difficult thing, right? Of just going for it.
Yeah.
Right. And I can tell you, I'm thinking of one of my clients now. She got caught up in the whole product agile, the excitement that's huge right now. And she was really into it. She got her certification. She was able to make a lateral move in her company. And when she got in there, the reality of agile for her versus all the, rainbows and unicorns that you'll see people talk about, it was terrible. It was lots of meetings, lots of talk, but no action. It was a lot of people in the room, but nothing getting done. Right. Yeah. And if she had found a way to get some of that experience, even if it was just sitting in the room.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it was talking to other product owners, other coaches, right. All the pieces with that, then she would have saved herself that. Right. And so, there is this balance between following the curiosity. And I want you all to do that. Yes, yes, yes. And by the way, get your company to pay for it. Okay. Yeah. Make a case for how this is going to help you in your current job and get 100%. The company to pay for it. Okay. I love learning, but I want you to be honest with yourself. Am I doing this because it's putting some space between me and the scary stuff, putting myself out there, claiming what I want, having, the chutzpah to say, yes, I've been doing this for the last 10 years, but now I want to do this. Yeah. Right. And that can be hard. right? And I see it with entrepreneurs all the time, right? I work with coaches and they're like, oh, I need to go get my coaching certificate. And I'm like, 12 months and how many thousands of dollars later, have you ever had a client? Do you know you actually want to do this?
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Yeah. So you don't need a lot of money to make a career change. You also can do it while you have the job, right? If you have the means, you can certainly take some time off in between, but it doesn't have to cost anything. Right.
That's such a great point. That's a great point. And I think finding a mentor that already is in that space, that's willing to sort of help give you clarity and insight, ask those questions maybe you don't feel comfortable asking, kind of a thing, somebody that's authentic and then that could even possibly champion you. I mean, again, at our Orlando happy hour, we had a woman who worked for a very large, very well-known organization that every single one of you would know if I mentioned it, but we try to keep all that stuff confidential, but the two women worked in the same group, or not in the same group, same company, two different groups. And she was like, I've been at this company for 30 years and I really want to make a change. And the other woman's like, well, why don't you just do it? Like, come to my department. I will champion for you. I will vie for you. I will vouch for you. I will get you over here. So if you're in a larger organization, sometimes it might just be a matter of finding a champion within the discipline or group that you are interested in. And you never know where it could land you. We only got a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to this last question because Nessa already came up, mentioned it, and it was definitely on my list of questions. When it comes to making a career change, because it's kind of been peppered throughout our conversation today, how do we begin to overcome that fear of change? I think that's the biggest question most of us probably have on our minds when it comes to this.
So the old way, right? Smash the fear, ignore the fear. No, that's not what I'm going to tell you to do. I want you to befriend the fear. I want you to really think about, rather than trying to push it away or resist it, because it will come back up and then it's going to be running the show unconsciously. I want you to really, and this comes down to part of that inner work, right? Really have a conversation with the fear, right? What are you afraid of? And then keep going deeper. No, really, why are you afraid of that? Why are you afraid of that? Right? What's really going on here? It's probably not the situation in front of you, right? It might be, like I told you, I was talking to a client today and I said to her, because she's been at the same company for a long time. And I said, well, have you thought, right? Because I've mentioned it over the years, we've worked together. Have you thought of looking outside? Because sometimes you have to leave to come back and get promoted, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I hate it. It's terrible, but that's the reality of things. And I said to her, so why, right? Why are you not allowing yourself to even think about it? She goes, oh, I have a really sweet gig. I can work remote. And I'm like, okay. And what else? And she's like, and I've got good retirement, and she was like kind of pushing at things. And I'm like, so what's the fear? And she paused and she's like, well, and she mentioned this company that she worked for over 10 years ago where she was laid off. Mm-hmm. And it's very traumatic because, they were afraid they were going to lose the house and it without this job and the stability. Right. And so her fear in the present, the fear that's driving how she takes action or not, does not actually come from the current event. It comes from something that happened before. So her current reaction to her current situation, she's actually reacting to something in the past. And so this is why it's so important to do that inner work and to do the healing and the grieving, to come to terms with what happened, right? What were the lessons learned? And perhaps what are some beliefs that you took from that are no longer serving you? Right. And so when I say befriend the fear, it's not letting fear be in the driver's seat, but it's cozying up to it. Right. Mm-hmm. And what's going on? What do you have to tell me? Yeah. Right. And you can really glean so much from that, really allowing fear to be the teacher. Mm-hmm. Right. And then the next thing is to take action with the fear. And I'm not saying this crazy action, even, if you are feeling this so much in your body where, you can feel your nervous system activated bit by bit, right? Any science people, any chemistry people, right? When they do an experiment, you titrate little by little, drop by drop. And so when we are dealing with anything that really has our nervous system riled up, right? Probably comes from some sort of traumatic experience, some sort of fear survival, right? That's probably, if we dig deep, what it is. We get to just take baby steps. So it doesn't mean you go from not thinking about your career to now you're posting every day on LinkedIn and you're totally updated and you're having conversations every single day, right? How about, to start with, right, just 5 minutes of quiet with myself a day, and little by little, bit by bit, right? Be the turtle that wins the race, so that you can expand your capacity, you can expand your nervous system slowly, versus if you go 0 to 100, right? You go do what I said, right? And then you're so burnt out and overwhelmed that you stop doing any job search for a month. Anyone do that? Yeah. But from 0 to 100, and then you're paralyzed. So be with the fear, befriend the fear, learn from the fear, and take action, even if it's small, tiny steps, with that by your side, right?
That is so great. That's such good advice, because I think even basic psychology talks about that. Like, you microdose sort of yourself, or micro exposure to yourself. Like people who are, I have a dear friend and neighbor who's agoraphobic, and part of her process in healing is just 1 step out the door. Well, next day, 2 steps out the door. If she feels like she can, the next day, 3 steps. And sometimes she goes backwards, and sometimes she goes forwards. And I can tell you, I was driving by the other day. It was like a month or 2 ago, and I saw her at the corner of our street. I rolled down the window. I was like, oh my gosh. She's like, I know, right? I mean, an extreme example, but I think you're right. I love that, asking yourself, where is this fear coming from? It's very obvious to say, but every answer is really in a question. And I just love that our last 2 topics and conversations in the Power Lounge have really been about digging in and asking ourselves the hard questions, the questions that we don't even often ask ourselves. Another thing I've tried in the past too, that I think was helpful when I was feeling the fear of making the leap into entrepreneurship and ownership, because having gone from very stable job and, good salary, and, I mean, there's a lot about my job that I loved before, but I wasn't super fulfilled, is I sat down and I wrote, is like, what is the worst case scenario if I do this? What is the worst case scenario if I don't do this? And kind of getting both those out, like sometimes writing out what you're afraid of kind of makes you realize, well, is that really something I need to be afraid of?
Right?
Like, what is really the worst that can happen? And kind of giving that some voice, and some, like you said, listen to the fear. It's telling you something. And I 100% agree with the fact that it could be absolutely triggered from just about anything, not even just being laid off, but how you think other people see you. Again, that identity, me making a change and going from being, an executive, blah, 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 to somebody who just does consulting, but goes to become a consultant. Like, is that part of the fear? I actually had another good conversation too with a woman who's an academic and wants to get out, and she was struggling with that. She's like, I'm a professor, I'm a doctor, I have a PhD. It's so hard to walk away from that.
I struggled with that. I had this identity, right, that I was corporate, I was climbing the ladder, blah, blah, blah. And, after writing Job Joy, I had to listen to my own advice, which was not to go back to an office in a cubicle, right? But you bring up so many great points there, right?
And you too.
Yeah, and you just need one person. You need one person to say yes, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
and it's like our nervous system is reacting to this as if it's life or death.
Yeah.
Right? Our nervous system thinks, if I leave, I'm going to die.
Right.
Or if I'm not successful, I'm going to die. And the fact is, that's not the case, right? Even if your worst fear is you're going to end up, on the side of the road in a box, you're not. Anyone who is here is the type of person who will figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? That's not going to happen to you. And remember, when it comes to career, there are very few things we can't reverse. If I wanted to go back and be a consultant, I could do that. If I wanted to go back, and work, in marketing and strategy, I could do that. But, it's really looking and saying, if I were, my older self, right? Imagine your 70-year-old self, right? Is she going to be proud of what I did and the chances I took, right? Is she going to feel like I came to earth and I lived full out? I played full out.
100%.
Right? Or if that doesn't work, if you have kids and your daughter was in the same situation, right? Even at your same age, what would you tell her? Would you tell her to stay put and be miserable, chin up, No one likes their job anyway.
Look it up, Buttercup.
You tell her? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right. So even if you can't give that great advice to yourself, think about what you would tell a young person. Right.
Yeah. Another thing I love about mindfulness is like the practice of impermanence and understanding impermanence. It sounds silly and morbid, but there's nothing like thinking at end of life, where is my head going to be? And what am I going to look back on and really be grateful of the chances I took, the things I did, the things that I overcame from a fear standpoint. So I hope all of you feel like you have a little bit more courage, a little bit more guidance. Those lovely, was it 3 C's or 4 C's? Go through them again, one more time.
So we have clarity, we have campaign, right? That's your positioning, right? And then we have connection.
Awesome. So start working on those little baby steps, like 1 or 2 steps out the door every day. Okay. Do we have any questions from our live audience that's listening? And then we also have a virtual job fair that's happening. Y'all can feel free to drop it in the chat or come off of mute if you do have a question while I'm yapping. Julie's going to drop the link to, this is a free job fair. It's a career summit and job fair. So we've been very focused these last few months on really helping kind of guide women through their career journeys, because it is just such a big thing that's happening for all of us right now. So we have a woman who's coming to talk. She is the CMO of Ceros, and she's going to be talking about career pathing for yourself that is more holistic from a life and work standpoint. And then we've got 2 amazing workshops, one all about negotiation strategies for women with Jacqueline Twilley. And then one of our facilitators for the group is on with us today. Nicole is going to be doing our I Am Remarkable, which is a Google proprietary experience and workshop that is also phenomenal. And then we've got several companies, from agencies to recruiting companies and organizations that are going to be there for all of you to meet. So Julie dropped the link into the chat. That's happening on May 12th. So if you want to join us for that, it's going to be another great day of a lot of wonderful content, an opportunity to connect with some potential employers, or just kind of, get around and ask people, what is it like to work at your company? What kind of roles do you have open? Like, treat it as just like an informational thing. Even I think y'all could get something out of it. All right. Anybody have any burning questions before we hop off? If not, you also have Kristen's LinkedIn info in there as well. You can reach out to either of us if there's anything that you all need. Everybody good? Kristen, do you have any last words for everyone before we sign off for the day?
Don't give up. You are worth it. We need you. And, if anything, right, take these last 2 years and just the state of the world to realize, right, that we need more on purpose people. We need more people to feel alive and connected, right? Otherwise, we're not going to change this world.
100% agree. I love it. Well, we will leave it at that, ladies. You all have a fabulous Friday, and I hope that you join us again for another Together Digital event. And if not, I'll see you hopefully here next week. Have a great weekend. Thank you again, Kristen. You're the best.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Julie, for helping out. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.